Hello and welcome to Ask the Expert, a daily series from 8:30 to 9 a.m. to help small businesses from Intuit QuickBooks. Uh, you can ask any questions in the comments of this feed or on QBATE, the hashtag on Twitter. If you need any more advice, you can join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook, and accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7 to be answering your questions. QuickBooks also have a dedicated COVID-19 information site. Just go to the QuickBooks website, scroll down a little bit, and click on the Big Learn More button under the header Support for you and your business under COVID-19. So just have a look at those things if you need any more information after this talk. My name's Dom Hallas. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for a Digital Economy, which is a lobby group for tech startups and scale-ups in the UK. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about what information and what support is available for the government for those innovative tech businesses. I'll talk a little bit more broadly about what support is available, and then I'll be answering your questions on what information you need, what challenges you face. And if I don't have the answers, I'll be guaranteed to sort of put those to the government and see whether we can get some answers for you. So first of all, who are Codec? What do we do? At Codec, we're, like I said, a lobby group for early stage technology companies. So we were founded in 2010 by a guy called Mike Butcher, who's a famous tech journalist, and Jeff Lynn, who is the founder of Seeders, the equity crowdfunding platform, which I'm sure many of you would have used to raise some early stage capital. And really, we focus on three main things in normal times. The first is access to talent, and how do we make sure that your businesses are able to access the best possible people to help your businesses thrive and grow. The second is access to finance, so whether that's early stage capital and incentives to start a business, or whether that's later stage, how do we make sure that the venture capital market is appropriate for tech companies as they grow. And the third bucket is regulation, and everything from the future of AI to online harms to data protection, and anything that could impact your business in the tech regulation space. But of course, all of our work now is focused around COVID-19 and addressing the challenges that you guys face. So what does that mean in practice? It means making sure that you have the liquidity you need, making sure you have the business support you need, and making sure that your businesses are able to survive through this period and thrive after it. And so why is this so important? How has the context changed for early stage tech businesses? The basic answer is that you can tell the story one of two ways. The first is in the numbers, where we know that investment is down 32% in Q1, according to the Bohurst data. But that Q1, of course, was only really impacted at the end of Q1. So you're looking at something that's been hugely impactful in a very short space of time and will continue to impact the ability of early stage technology companies and other small businesses to raise investment and then succeed. But you can also tell that story through the emails that I have in my inbox from founders of really great businesses that have either been going through the investment process and then had investors pull out, or were about to raise money and then aren't able to have the conversations they want to have. And so there's a real risk that we'll lose a whole generation of these companies if they're not able to get the support they need to survive through this period. So that's the context. So then we'll have a talk a little bit about what the government has done already, what we're still waiting for detail on, and then we'll have a conversation about your questions. So, I mean, the main sort of three buckets of things that the government initially announced, and then I'll talk a little bit about the specific startup package that was announced on the 18th of April. So the first sort of the three things that the government announced initially was the CBIL scheme, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. The business rates grant scheme, and the CJRS, the furlough scheme as it's known. And the challenge for businesses of these three things is for the tech businesses that I represent is that if the CBIL scheme wasn't available to loss-making companies. And so for the vast majority of these early stage tech businesses, the way in which they design their business and the way in which the business model works is that they will lose an awful lot of money as they grow very quickly, probably raising venture capital as they go, and then ultimately have a more profitable business in the long run. So they simply weren't able to access the CBIL scheme. Also, the business rates and grants that many of you hopefully will be able to access through councils wasn't accessible to them either initially, because a lot of them work in co-working spaces and they don't pay business rates directly as a line item in their budget. They might pay it through a membership fee to a co-working space, but it meant that councils weren't necessarily able to identify those micro businesses and provide them with the grants that are available to other small businesses. So they only really had the furlough scheme, and we know that that's been widely taken up across the business community for understandable reasons. But when you're a super small business, it's a huge challenge to see how you could furlough some workers and then continue your work as a business. You know, when you have 5 employees, it's not easy to make reductions. So that was the big picture challenge. So we've been lobbying the government at Codec and more broadly, the startup community had been lobbying the government for some additional support. And so what was announced on the 18th of March was a new startup package from the government. And so I'm going to walk you through the sort of 2 main elements of that package and then talk about what detail we're still waiting for. So the first was the creation of a £250 million future fund, as it's called, which would invest in early stage startups on a 1-to-1 match basis with private investors. So the private investors would put in £250 million of capital gradually as well, in the form of what's called a convertible loan note that would initially serve as a loan to those companies, but ultimately convert into equity in those companies. So the government, through the British Business Bank, would end up owning a stake in those businesses. So we're waiting at the moment for details of the package. We're still waiting for the specifics of how companies can apply and things like that. We're hopeful of details very soon, but that's roughly what the future fund looks like, and I'm happy to take further questions on that. The second part of this is additional funding for Innovate UK, the UK's innovation agency, of £750 million. 200 million of this is to accelerate payments to existing customers who basically needed additional cash on hand. And then an additional 550 million of fresh funding to support new and existing projects from customers. So again, the details of that will be coming in the next sort of couple of weeks, and how to apply and what to apply, and which companies will specifically be eligible should be coming out very, very soon. But we're waiting to hear what's going on. So that's a quick summary of what's out there for early stage tech business. I'm well aware that the fantastic audience that will be listening today will go much more broadly than that. It won't just be tech businesses, so please do send in your questions. I'm more than happy to answer them where I can, and I'll be totally honest where I can't, and I'll try and get additional information for you and do use the pages that QuickBooks are providing as well. So thanks very much. That's a quick summary from me, and I'm happy to take your questions. So we'll start with Louise, who's sent something in on Facebook Messenger, and she says, I have a genuine passion for tech, in particular manufacturing technology. Before COVID-19, I was going to take the plunge and have my own startup within that sector, but now I feel deflated. What do you think I can be doing that can give me hope that I will have my own tech startup, hopefully in the near future? So that's a great question. I think that there is an awful lot of challenges that come with this huge downturn, as we can see. But actually, one of the things that from a startup perspective, one of the things that we have to think really carefully about is that actually so many of the hugely successful companies that we see in the tech startup ecosystem, certainly, and not just in the UK but also globally, were founded in the wake of terrible circumstances in the economy. So very famously, the Airbnb was founded in the course of the last economic crisis. And there's a whole range of businesses that were founded in that sort of 2008, 2009, 2007 period that are now the tech giants, or some of the tech giants that we would see today. So I think there is a real opportunity, and you saw that in the UK particularly in the fintech space, where frankly, and to be blunt about it, a huge number of workers in the City of London, for example, were laid off as a result of the financial crisis and the impact that it had on financial services, but often went on to found these fantastic tech businesses that are in the fintech space that has created in the UK the best fintech ecosystem in Europe. So I think there is obviously a sort of a challenge when you understandably need the security that comes in the case of an economic downturn like the one we're experiencing. But actually that sort of, what we're actually more likely to see in the longer run is that entrepreneurship as a concept, just like it's done over the past 10 years, is hugely, is hugely on the up in the context of Britain and we're optimistic that we'll see more and more people doing that. So I think don't lose hope, Louise, is the basic answer. Like, keep working away. Like, it's understandable if you want to be a bit more careful in the next few months, and we wait and see what the broader impact will be. But I think that what we'll continue to see is an uptick and a bounce back in the exciting digital space that I work in and a bunch of your companies are working in, because I know that there is huge interest in it, and there'll continue to be huge interest from investors. The sector will continue to thrive in the long run. So, I'm optimistic about the sort of broad trends. Jenny from Facebook has asked, how do you feel startups and new SMEs can bounce back after COVID-19 has passed? That's a huge question. I think that's the thing that we're thinking hugely about at the moment is, not only do we allow companies to survive through this COVID-19 impacted period, but then thrive after it. And I mean, I think there's sort of two main questions there. The first is, what is the long-term impact of this crisis? And so we have to be totally honest, and I have to be totally honest from my perspective, is that it depends a little bit on how long this crisis goes. So right now, you'll have probably all watched Boris on Sunday night, and you'll have heard the probably more detail at the press conference he gave yesterday about what the rollback of the lockdown looks like. But the honest answer is we don't know when the sort of normal, quote unquote, economic conditions will return. And so that's a really big question as to how best to react in your business. Is ultimately, it depends an awful lot on economic conditions, not just in the broader economy, but in your specific sector or your specific vertical. But I think that the main thing is ultimately that, as I said before, innovation is always going to be a key driver of our economic growth. It is going to be a key focus for new customers as and when they take up your product. Suddenly, you're going to have a range of purchasers at larger corporates and others for whom the bottom line and cost reduction will be really, really important as they try and grow their businesses quickly. And so there is going to be a market for innovative ideas that will exist after this crisis. So if you're able to fill that and you're able to successfully do that, that's great, and that's a real opportunity for you. So don't lose hope, basically. Like, we're going to wait and see exactly what the impact of this crisis will be over the course of the next few months. And, hopefully we'll all be able to escape our houses soon. But ultimately, I'm bullish about the chance that startups and new SMEs have in the long term, because we know that they've been the key drivers of the economy for the past 10 years and will continue to be key drivers of the economy for the next 10 years. Ivan on Twitter has asked, what are the interest rates on the future funds when it comes to paying it back? And will there be hidden costs down the road? This is a really good question. And so I think the key thing to remember when it comes to the future fund is that the government absolutely intends for these to convert into equity. So even though the money is technically a loan, the expectation is that the government is fundamentally buying a stake in your business through this convertible loan note. So the actual interest rates when it comes to the future fund it's an 8% interest rate, and the reason why it's an 8% interest rate is because ultimately the businesses that it will be investing in are venture-backed loss-making businesses. There is a higher level of risk than there would be on a typical loan, for example. But the expectation is that actually you will never pay back the loan because it will convert into equity in your business. That is how the fund is designed, and that is what the vast majority of companies will want. So when the question from Ivan was, will there be hidden costs to the fund? And the honest answer is they're not hidden. They're very clear. Like, they're pretty upfront. The idea that, look, like, the expectation is that the government loan will convert into equity, and you will have that equity on your cap table. Laura on Twitter has asked, my angel has gone quiet on my new app business. I'm worried that my funding is about to dry up. Is there anything for me to force payments when due? That's a great question. So, we've heard this time and again is, you have investors who have suddenly vanished or are understandably more broadly concerned about their economic situation. I mean, I think the really tricky challenge, and I don't know your specific circumstances, Laura, but I'll provide my contact details a little bit later, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you about this. But obviously, the kind of broader trend, and I think the thing we have to be really careful of as entrepreneurs, is the fact that, frankly, that we know that investors have been more broadly hit, and particularly, the term angel is actually a term for high net worth individual. right? And the reality of an awful lot of the capital of these individuals is tied up in the broader economy or in stocks and shares or in the markets. And we've seen those take a hit over the course of the past few months. And so, it is perhaps understandable and from their perspective that they might want to sit on their hands and be a little bit careful about making investments in this period. Now, obviously, from your question, which says, is there anything for me to do to force payments when due, is a different question as to will they fulfill their contractual arrangement. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't comment on the specifics of how exactly that would work. But ultimately, my recommendation would be, if that is the case, if that is the challenge, and like I said, I'm more than happy to have a more detailed conversation with you about this, that you would ultimately have a conversation with a lawyer about what options you had available to you. But ultimately, the reality is, the best solution is to sit down with your investor and have a sort of adult conversation about what the challenges are, because they're probably facing challenges as well. And so being ultimately as honest as you can with each other and hopefully using that relationship is going to be really, really important. Marcus on Twitter has asked, he said, "Hey Dom, I'm an investor in multiple startups across the tech industry. Which industry do you see financially striving?" I presume he meant thriving throughout COVID-19, and why? It's a great question. So, I think that there's more broadly, if you look at the tech sector, you're going to see a lot of winners as the first thing. We're all here working from our homes, or an awful lot of us, and using products that we wouldn't necessarily have used before. I spend a lot of my time talking to members of parliament and civil servants and others, and it has been remarkable. And the uptake of these digital technologies that had never been used previously. We've got Zoom questions in parliament now, and we're using the kind of fantastic products for conferences and others that we would never have used before. So I think there's a real opportunity in tech more broadly, but in terms of the specifics, I think certainly those kind of productivity tools are very interesting. We'll continue to see, the kind of B2B space really successfully growing, precisely because they're the tools that businesses need to adopt at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot more of a challenge when it comes to things like direct-to-consumer products or even like consumer-facing apps, which are much harder to use and more likely to be tied to hugely affected industries like travel or hospitality or something like that as well. But particularly that B2B space, I'm very optimistic about. But of course, we'll wait and see what happens over the course of the next 3 months, and it's all caveated with the who knows what's going to happen economically as we sort of come out of this lockdown and what situation we'll face. Gabrielle's asked, how do we reach out to you to lobby on your behalf? Do you have regular meetups or forums? That's a great question, Gabrielle. The first thing is, so you can go to our website, which is Coadec.com, that's Coadec.com, and sign up for our mailing list, where we send out all the information on what we're doing, what we're working on, what challenges we think that the community needs tackling, and also ask for the community's feedback, for your feedback on what we should be working on, what the priority should be, what you care about, and how we can have conversations with you. So we're sort of sharing all the detail that we can, and making sure that we're advocating as best possible for the community. But do reach out to us, whether that's through engagement with our specific asks and the conversations we're having. Like I said, the mailing list is the best place to do that, and you can sign up for that on our website. But also, I'll share my contact details on here as well. And then if you have any questions, do feel free to drop me a line. Claire from Facebook Messenger says, how would I know which option out of the bounce back loan scheme and Innovate UK funded would be more suitable for my business? That's a really important question. And so I think that the bounce back loan scheme, which I haven't touched on so far, of course, is a scheme in which you can get up to 25% of your turnover, or a maximum of £50,000, as a loan that is 100% backed by the government. And the idea is that the way in which that's structured will encourage the banks to loan much quicker to you and hopefully make a decision much faster than they had been for the CBIL scheme. We're already seeing that have some success. We're already seeing that billions of pounds worth of loans through the bounce back loan scheme have been issued, which is great. And I guess, Claire, it all comes down to what kind of business you are. And I think that the sort of core answer to that is, we know that the Innovate UK funding is focused specifically around R&D intensive businesses. Oftentimes, they're people who are intentionally getting grant or loan funding from Innovate UK because they're R&D intensive and it takes them a long time to get to market. But the new funding that will be coming through Innovate UK, this sort of £550 million that will be broken up into tranches and then sent out to the community, will ultimately be on very similar terms to how they traditionally are considering the way in which they would hand money out. So I guess like what I would say is, if you were a business that would be suitable for Innovate UK funding more broadly, and you can have a look at Innovate UK now and look at their programs and see the kind of businesses they're targeting and what they've been aiming at, then it's likely that you would be a kind of business that they would consider funding at this time as well. But ultimately, to be honest, in terms of the open funnel and the thing that will be easier for you to access if you're a profit-making business, is the bounce back loan scheme. And ultimately, like, that comes down to, do you have sufficient turnover to make sure that 25% of your turnover would help you survive through this period, or £50,000 would help you survive through this period. If it would, then the bounce back loan scheme will be available to you, and we would encourage you to take it up. Lynn Mari on the Facebook live feed has said, what can we do if you're self-employed? That's a really, really big question. And so we've seen there are some support schemes from the government when it comes to self-employed people that aren't being dealt with quick enough. We're well aware of that challenge. And I'm sure many of you are as well. But ultimately, like, the question is, like, how can you go and have a conversation about both your broader tax implications with people like HMRC, where we know that they're being as flexible as possible under the circumstances, but ultimately take up the government support scheme for self-employed people where possible, which is £2,500 if you have made a profit of less than £50,000 in a year. And so ultimately, you should have a look at that and see what is available to you, and then hopefully you'll be able to take that up. Lee from Twitter has asked, do you help startups market themselves abroad, or are you a pure lobby group? So we basically specifically work on public policy. So we can more than happily, and like I said, I'll provide my details a little bit later, help businesses in any way we can. So, where people come to us, we can point them in the right direction of places to look. But we specifically focus on the challenges of public policy and engage the government in that. And I'm by no means a successful external marketer to global markets, and so I wouldn't want to lead you up the garden path. But I'm more than happy to provide the right introductions to people who'd be much better placed to do that than me, and hopefully you will be able to get the support you need as you want to grow into international markets, which we absolutely should encourage. Heather on Facebook Messenger has asked, I'm finalizing my strategy for a startup and want to pursue something in information technology. I've heard about angel investors, but I would like to know how I can find them and what your experience is with them. This is a really good question. And so, first of all, we know that the vast majority of early stage companies, of early stage tech startups, are invested in by angels. So there is a huge number of these early stage companies funded every year. There's over 30,000 of what we would define as tech startups in the United Kingdom. And the vast majority of those are funded by these angels. And the challenge, of course, is that, as I said a little bit earlier, the definition of what is an angel investor is pretty broad, because actually the term angel is just another word for a high net worth individual who is has the ability to invest in your business. But in terms of the place to start with those conversations, the places like the UK Business Angels Association, which is the sort of body for business angels, and has not only a membership of business angels who work really effectively, but also information on how angels work, would be the sort of first port of call for me. And then when you say what is your experience with them, I guess it varies an awful lot, right? And this is the nature of the fact that you can have a very broad range of people, from those that are registered business angels with the UK Business Angels Association and have a reputation for fortitude and a very good conduct themselves in a very professional way. And then, of course, just like in any industry, there will be people who actually are throwing some money at something and don't really know what they're doing. So I think you have to be really, really careful and hopefully try and find the kind of appropriate advice. But also, you're sort of finalizing a strategy for your company. And what's really, really important when you think about finding investment is that you find an investor that's suitable for you. and that can work with you, because ultimately they're going to be on this journey with you as you develop your business. And so, the question is, like, not only like, is the investor a good investor, which is an important question that you've asked, but also, are they the right investor for you and your business? And so they're the sort of two key questions that I would suggest, but I would start that conversation and start that search by looking at the UK BAA and the information that they have to offer. Sienna on Twitter has asked, what do you see will be the challenges and opportunities for startups and small businesses in the next couple of months or a year? So, I mean, the challenge, first of all, is we're all, I mean, I'm currently sat in my spare room having this conversation with you. And so we know that if you're a consumer-facing company, if you're a company that is built around certain industries like hospitality or others, it will be a huge challenge. Because the reality of the circumstances have changed significantly. But like I said, I'm ultimately optimistic that we know that the small businesses and startups have provided the vast majority of growth, for the economy over the course of the last 10 years. They will continue to do so. And I think that from a tech startup perspective, a lot of those opportunities come in the kind of B2B services that we're seeing adopted now, because either businesses are trying to cut costs as they look at how they would survive through this period, and so they're looking for innovative ways to do that, and there's never been a better opportunity for startups in that space to push out and try and have conversations. But also, for opportunities in new and interesting ways that we would never have seen before, like the platforms we're all using to have conversations with you now. So I think there's a lot of questions, and we're waiting to see what happens. Linnea on Facebook has asked, I found it okay to manage my team remotely or working from home. Do you think there's value in renting out a shared space anymore, apart from the free beer and knowledge sharing in meetups, which I seem to be getting from programs like this, or the webinars I find on LinkedIn? And that's a really good question, is that, we know that the working circumstances have changed substantially, and a lot of people are struggling with that, but it's great to hear that there are people who are working really effectively, and tech startups in particular actually can work from home pretty effectively. It's all online. And I think that the gaps come, and this is why ultimately, we think that whilst things won't happen immediately, there will be a move back to sort of workplaces in the longer run. Is that it's not just about the free beer, as you say, although that does help. But I think there's a huge level of kind of the community support in the right kind of co-working spaces and the right kind of workspaces that go way above and beyond the kind of specifics of you're renting a few desks. And so if you're able to find those communities that work for you, and so Codec, we're based in Shoreditch at a place called Tech Hub that's been around for 10 years, and they've really built a reputation in the community for things like relationships with investors, so that investors will know they can come in and see businesses in the tech ecosystem. Or, how do you have conversations amongst the community that's there, the 400 businesses, about how you do digital marketing better, or how you do support better. And actually it's about a community helping each other, as opposed to a place where you rent desks. And so I think you're more likely to see an uptick in those kind of community spaces, because that's truly where the value is, compared to the WeWorks of the world that operate in a slightly different way, and you're renting a desk from a large international corporation. And so I think there's a real opportunity from those more community-driven, community-focused approaches that can then build the kind of community that we really need. Nick on Twitter's asked, how do you lobby the government? Do you have loads of meetings with them? How does it work? That's a really good question. And so I think that ultimately I spend an awful lot of time having conversations. I like at the moment that's changed an awful lot. I'm doing a lot of that by video. But ultimately we spend plenty of time having discussions and focusing on a range of issues. So usually it's basically just meetings. At the moment it's on the phone, but yeah, we built relationships over an awfully long time with civil servants and with MPs, and so that's how we spend our time. And that's the last question. That's all we have time for. It's been really fun answering all your questions. Thanks very much for taking the time to get in touch. If you have any more questions, do get in touch with the QuickBooks support team on Facebook, or reach out to Codec and myself on Twitter. So it's just at Codec, COADEC. Or with myself, I'm Dom_Hallas on Twitter. Again, feel free to reach out. Do follow me, and I will happily take any of your questions. Do drop me a DM if you need to. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Judith Dugdale, who's the head of digital solutions at MHA Moore and Smalley. So do continue to tune in. There's some fantastic expert program. It's an awesome program the QuickBooks team has put together. And a reminder that if you need any more advice, join the official QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook, and you'll have accountants and business experts and other people on hand 24/7 to be helpful and supportive as you survive through this period, hopefully succeed after it, and your businesses will continue to thrive. Thanks very much for taking the time, and I'm Dom Hallas. Appreciate it. Thank you.